Thank you. Our speaker this morning is Reverend Keith Norton, and just about everybody in this room knows Keith, knows the contribution that he's made to Center of Enlightenment for over a decade, probably 2 decades by now.
Yeah.
He's served on our board in various positions. He was also appointed our senior minister by Reverend Ken Nowaczewski, our teacher and mentor. He married his wife Fiona here in this church. So this is home base for Keith. And even if he drifts away, he keeps coming back. And that's good for us. And hopefully for him. He's got a powerful lesson this morning. And so without any more talking from me, let's welcome Reverend Keith Norton to the podium.
Thank you, Reverend Carol. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
A couple of years ago, I took a course in school called Interpersonal Communication. The textbook we used was called Interpersonal Communication, A Mindful Approach to Relationships by Jason Wrench, Narissa Punian, and Catherine Esteban, and they're all college professors. One of the chapters we covered in class was specifically about the difference between hearing and listening. And that's what my sermon is today. Are you just hearing what I'm saying, or are you actually listening? I'm sure at some point we've all been in the situation where we've been talking to someone, whether it be a coworker or during a meeting, a close friend at dinner, or a loved one. And at some point you realize that you're thinking about, what am I going to do tomorrow? What do I need to do for work? And then all of a sudden you realize, and it sounds like the teacher from the Peanuts. Wah, 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 wah. And then you snap back and go, okay, let me pick up where I am. Interpersonal communication essentially means a conversation between 2 or more people. And according to the authors of the textbook, hearing refers to a passive activity where an individual perceives sound by detecting vibrations through the air. And hearing is defined as a physiological process that is continually happening. We are bombarded by sounds all the time, such as external noises, the traffic passing by, the birds singing, the sound of the refrigerator kicking on, the air conditioning kicking on. Those are just some of the samples of the hundreds of thousands of sounds we hear every day, but we are so used to them, our brain auto-tunes them out. Unless you're in a soundproof room or 100% deaf, we are consistently hearing sounds. Even in a soundproof room, other sounds that filtered out, that are not normally heard, like a beating heartbeat or breathing, will become more apparent as a result of the blocked background noise. I recently saw an article in the internet where there's a reward of up to $1 million for anyone that can stay 24 hours in the world's most soundproof room. People have taken up the challenge, but most people leave after an hour because they start to hallucinate. They can't handle the quietness. They said it's so quiet you can actually hear the blood traveling through your veins, and it becomes maddening. So people actually leave. The closest experience I've ever had to that is in a float tank. I did an hour in a float tank, which is Epsom salts, and it's like massive amount of Epsom salts where you're in this big tank. You float on top of the water and you're in complete darkness for an hour. And I thought, well, that'd be pretty cool to try. I've always wanted to try it, and they're local, you know. So for Veterans Day, they had a special. If you were a veteran, you get an hour free. So I took advantage of it. I will say the first 15 minutes was pretty unnerving because you're in there and you're floating and you're like, this is really weird. Like your body is just not used to being in complete dark, complete floating, feeling no gravity, hearing no sounds, nothing. After you get over that anxiety, it is actually really cool. Remember, hearing is a physiological process that is continually happening. Listening, on the other hand, is generally seen as the active process. Listening is focused concentration, attention for the purpose of understanding the meanings expressed by a source. From this perspective, hearing is more than an automatic response when your ear perceives information, whereas listening is what happens when we purposely attend to different messages. We can take this a step further and differentiate normal listening from critical listening. Critical listening is the careful, systemic thinking and reasoning to see whether a message makes sense in light of factual evidence. From this perspective, it's one thing to attend to someone's message, but something very different to analyze when that person is saying based on known facts and evidence. In today's world, I find that some people listen only to respond and not to fully understand and interpret what's actually being said. And that seems like that's where our world is today. Like people are just focused on responding as quickly as they can without actually interpreting what, you're trying to say. So here are some steps that can help you understand how to truly listen. And one method is called the Hurrier method, and it's Hurrier. And there's 6 stages to it. The 6 stages are representation of the following. Step 1 is hearing what's represented by the ear. The brain represents the next 4 stages. That's the processing. And then a person's mouth represents the final stage. So let's get into it. Step 1, H, hearing. Are we truly listening to being what is said, or are simply hearing words? To fully engage in mindful listening, it is important to take hearing seriously because of the issue of intention. If we go into an interaction with another person without really intending to listen to what they have to say, we may end up being a passive listener, which is nothing more than hearing and nodding your head. And I'm sure at some point we've all done that. I mean, it seems like it's human nature. 2 is understanding the you in Hurrier. The second stage of the listening model is understanding, or the ability to comprehend and decode the source's message. Simply decoding is when we attempt to break down the message we've heard into comprehensive meanings. R is stage 3, remembering. Once we've decoded a message, we actually have to remember the message itself or the ability to recall a message that was sent. We are bombarded every day by messages throughout our day, so it's completely possible to attend a message and decode it and then forget about it 2 seconds later. I'm guilty of that. Stage 4, I, interpreting. Interpreting messages involves attention to all various speaker and contextual variables that provide a background for accurately perceived messages. A lot of interpreting process is being aware of the nonverbal cues, both oral and physical, that accompany a message to accurately assign meaning to the message. And that's one thing police do when they do like interviews of criminals. Ministers are trained to like look for signs that, people are saying something, but there's like kind of that, cops, as an example, are very good at telling if somebody's actually lying or trying to deliberately deceive them by their body motions. And there's a TED talk we watched in this class on body language. And they actually have, believe it or not, there are criminologists that specialized in body language and can watch politicians talk or meeting each other. And there's a famous one where one of the presidents, I don't recall who, went to meet Vladimir Putin, and they were not fighting, but trying to line up so whose hand would appear in front of the camera first. And then there's another president that actually went through the door and put his hand on the back of another president from another state, and that's considered like kind of like getting the upper hand, so to speak. That's where that term comes from. Step 5, evaluating. The next stage is the evaluating stage, or judging the message itself. One of the biggest hurdles many people have with listening is the evaluation stage. Our personal biases, values, and beliefs can prevent us from effectively listening to someone else's message. That's that listening to respond phase. You know, you got it in your head. This is how the conversation is going to go. This is how I'm going to respond, but you're not actually truly listening. When it comes to evaluating another person's message, it's important to remember to be mindful. Too often we evaluate another's messages with an analytical or cold quality that is antithetical to being mindful. Stage 6, R is responding. It's important to realize the effective listening starts with the ear and centers in the brain, and then only should someone provide feedback to the message itself. Often people jump from hearing and understanding to responding, which can cause problems as they jump to conclusions as arisen by the truncated interpretation and evaluation. We automatically, instead of listening, we automatically go to the response. So we've missed the complete middle of the conversation. Ultimately, how we respond to a resource message will dictate how the rest of the interaction will progress. If we outright dismiss what someone is saying, we put up a roadblock that says, I don't want to hear anything else. On the other hand, if we nod our heads and say, tell me more, then we are encouraging the speaker to continue the interaction. For effective communications to occur, it's essential to consider how our responses will impact the other person and the relationship with that other person. Overall, when it comes to being a mindful listener, here's another tip you can use, and it's based on the acronym COAL, C-O-A-L. C is curiosity, O is openness, A is acceptance, L is for love. When we engage in COAL, we can listen mindfully and be in that moment. So in reviewing the 6 steps, stage 1 is hearing, 2 is understanding, 3 is remembering, 4 is interpreting, 5 is evaluating, and 6 is responding. And for those that are open to spirit communication, this should all sound really familiar to you. Isn't that what we do when we open ourselves up to mediumship? First, we attempt to hear the message Spirit is giving us. Second, we attempt to understand the message. Next, we try to remember the message so we can relay it to the person that's receiving the message. And then the next step is interpreting, trying to figure out what the message is, because sometimes Spirit is not telling this full story, or it's how your mind has to interpret it. Like they may just give you a symbol or an analogy, and you got to try and work with that. Once we interpret the message, then we evaluate the message. Does it make sense? Does it feel right? Is it whole? Once we've completed all those steps, then we give the message to the receiver of the message or respond to them. This is the hardest part of learning mediumship, listening to Spirit, messages of Spirit, and trying to interpret and relay them to the receiver. I really believe that if everyone used these 6 steps to accurately listen to people instead of rapid fire answering the response, the world would be a more enjoyable place. There's another technique that we learned during the class from a TED Talk given by an attorney by the name of Kwame Christensen. Kwame is an attorney who specializes in conflict resolution. He uses a technique called compassionate curiosity, and here's how it works. Let's say we're involved in a discussion that the tension has risen, could boil over at any point. Instead of adding more fuel to the fire, what if he turned the tide in the discussion by beginning the question, he'd like, what can we do to help resolve this situation? Or is this what is really bothering you? Or is it something else? Or why do you feel that way about this situation? What this does to the conversation is that it introduces what therapists and experts call a distractor. It breaks down the escalation cycle and forces the person to think about this question that is now in front of them. In his TED Talk, Kwame talks about how he engaged in a difficult court case, and he used this technique to change the direction of discussions. And in the end, both parties came to a peaceful resolution. And according to the TED Talk, it was a very heated and long trial, and so he changed the direction and ended up getting what both parties wanted. Again, if everyone were to use this method, I think the world would be better off. Now, let's say you combine both techniques. How powerful is that? Imagine for a moment if you ask someone how their day's going and their reply is, it's horrible, nothing's going right. Do you just say, oh, I'm sorry, try to have a better day? Or do you ask, do you want to talk about it? Do you want to hear what is being said, or are you truly listening at the tone of their voice and how they answer you? Suppose by them saying, it's horrible, nothing is going right, they're really asking for help in an indirect way. Whether they're in an abusive relationship or don't want to ask for help or for fear out of retaliation, or they're just having issues in general. A lot of people have pride. Well, everybody has pride, but it's some people have like, they don't want to ask for help because they feel like they're not, you know, um, it hurts their pride, so to speak. To, perhaps by asking if they want to talk, or if you want to talk about it, they might open up a little and you're trying to get them the help that they truly need, but afraid to ask for. I want to share a true story that's happened to me many, many, many years ago. I had just come home from the Gulf War, um, and I was seeing a girl for many years, and he came home from dinner, and her brother was in the garage, and everybody was freaking out, like, "Oh my God!" And I'm gonna, for the sake of the conversation, I'll call him Jack. Jack is in the garage, and he's absolutely beside himself. What's wrong with Jack? Jack is like, don't go in there because he's uncontrollable. Well, in the interest of time, what happened is Jack was dating a lady by the name of, we'll share Diane, because Jack and Diane, right? For many, many years, and he found out that she was cheating on him. So he was in the garage going to take his life. So something, I don't know why to this day, or what happened, but I went out in the garage and everybody's like, don't go, don't, you're just going to encourage them. And I just went out in the garage and sat there and, and he just like, what are you doing here? And I'm like, just sitting here, if you want to talk, I'm here. And it was, maybe a few minutes of silence. And he says, God, it hurts so bad. I said, well, let's talk about it. And he goes, I thought this was the one. He goes, I've never loved anybody like I've loved Diane. And I go, well, I'm sorry that happened. And we started the conversation. And I sat out in that garage for 4 hours. And I think maybe we had 45 minutes of conversation. The rest of the time was just there, him knowing that I was there to anytime he wanted to talk. And, he was processing it. And at the end of the day, um, I don't, I never knew if he was really serious about committing suicide, but all the signs were there from what I could see at that time. But everybody's like, why'd you do that? And I'm like, I really don't know. I just happened to be at the right place at the right time, I guess. And, it was truly almost like inspired by a higher being, because had I like been in that situation and not been, I don't know, it just like I said, something inspired me to go out there and talk to him and guide the whole thing. So that simple question of, do you want to talk about it, may just change their life. And in closing, I really hope you were listening to my sermon today and just not hearing what I was said. So thank you for listening.